May 12, 1945. Dawn. A freight train hisses to a stop on a lonely siding near the English village of Ashwell. Inside, 200 German soldiers sit in silence. They have fought for 6 long years and lost. Now, the war is over, but their story is only just beginning. What happens next will challenge everything they thought they knew about enemies, mercy, and what it means to be human. The morning mist hangs low over the platform. From the slats in the wooden carriages, the prisoners see nothing but rolling fields and hedgerows, a landscape untouched by the devastation that has consumed Europe. To the east, the sun rises weakly through pale clouds. The air smells of wet grass and soot. The war in Europe has ended barely a week ago. Adolf Hitler is dead. Berlin has fallen. Germany has surrendered unconditionally. Across the continent, millions are displaced. Soldiers without nations, civilians without homes. The British train guards slide open the heavy doors. "Out you come," one says, his tone flat, weary. The prisoners obey. They climb down slowly, thin, hollow-eyed, uniforms hanging loose. They expect shouting, humiliation, maybe worse. Instead, they are met with silence. No jeers, no blows. Just the sound of boots crunching gravel and the distant call of birds. The guards form them into lines and march them down a narrow country lane bordered by hawthorn hedges. For the first time in years, the men breathe clean air. For the first time, they are surrounded not by ruins, but by life. Britain, in 1945, is exhausted. Victory has come, but at a terrible cost. Cities like London, Coventry, and Liverpool still bear the scars of German bombs. Rationing is stricter than ever. Fuel is scarce, and in the countryside, farms lie understaffed. Most of Britain's young men are still overseas or dead. To feed the population, the government makes a controversial decision. They will send German and Italian prisoners of war, men who only weeks ago were enemies, to work in the British fields. It shocks many. Newspapers call it unthinkable. But the harvest cannot wait. Among the prisoners marched that misty morning is Klaus Richter, a 31-year-old farmer from Bavaria. He had been conscripted into the Wehrmacht in 1940. Captured in France in the final months of the war, he has not heard from his wife and 2 daughters in over a year. He fears the worst. In the small crowd of villagers who gather to watch the prisoners pass, an elderly farmer named Thomas Whitley stands silently beside his truck. Whitley is 62, his face weathered by decades of sun and soil. He lost his son at Dunkirk, his nephew in North Africa. When the local authorities inform him that 4 German prisoners will be assigned to help on his farm, he says nothing. He simply nods. The drive to the farm is quiet. The Germans sit in the back of the truck, staring at the countryside rolling by, green pastures, stone cottages, church spires rising from the mist. Whitley's farm is modest. 100 acres of wheat and barley, a few dairy cows, a worn red barn. His wife died 2 years ago. He lives alone now, sustained by habit more than hope. When they arrive, he points out the tools, the horses, the plow. No speeches, no welcomes. One of the prisoners, Klaus Richter, steps forward. In careful English, he asks what work should be done. Whitley studies him for a long moment. Then, quietly, "Start with the north field." Richter nods. He knows this work. Within hours, he and the others are turning the soil, muscles straining beneath threadbare uniforms. By midday, they've plowed 3 acres. That afternoon, Whitley's daughter, Margaret, arrives with lunch, bread, cheese, and tea. She is 18, cautious, fair-haired. She's grown up on wartime propaganda, posters that show Germans as monsters. But when she sees them, tired, polite, hungry, something inside her shifts. She says nothing, sets down the basket, and walks back to the house. But the image stays with her. Men, not monsters. Days turn into weeks. A routine settles in. The prisoners arrive at dawn, work until dusk. They're not paid directly. That's against regulation. But Whitley makes sure they eat. He's surprised by their discipline, their quiet determination. They never complain. Sometimes, during breaks, he sits with them, sharing tea. Conversation is limited, but gestures suffice. Richter teaches a few English words: plow, seed, rain. Whitley learns a few German ones in return: Acker, Danke, Arbeit. Slowly, suspicion gives way to something quieter. Not friendship, not yet, but understanding. In the village, opinions are divided. Some call it obscene to show kindness to the enemy. Others, more practical, say, the work must be done, and the men are here. Children wave at the prisoners from the lanes. Old women leave bread by the gate. Even the local vicar preaches that forgiveness is not weakness, but strength. One Sunday, Mrs. Patterson, a widow from the First World War, brings the prisoners cake. "My husband fought the last one," she tells Whitley. "We learned enough then to know hate doesn't plant crops." By summer, the prisoners have become part of the landscape. They fix fences, milk cows, harvest wheat. A few with medical training assist the village doctor. Others repair farm machinery with remarkable skill. The guards, once ever present, now watch from a distance. Among them all, Richter stands out. He works harder, longer, often staying late to finish a task. Whitley begins to rely on him, not just for labor, but for advice. When to sow, when to rest the soil, how to treat the horses. Margaret notices too. She sees how Richter's hands tremble when he thinks no one's looking, how sometimes he stares toward the horizon, lost in thought. One afternoon, she brings him a letter she's written in simple English. It says that if he ever needs help finding his family, she'll try. Richter reads it slowly, folds it, and presses it to his chest. He thanks her in German. Words she doesn't understand, but the meaning is clear. Not every story in Ashwell is gentle. In a nearby village, a German prisoner tries to escape. He's caught within hours, starving and desperate. He's sent to a harsher camp up north. It reminds everyone that these men are still enemies, at least on paper. The war may be over, but its wounds still bleed beneath the surface. Yet, in Ashwell, something remarkable continues to grow. A fragile trust rooted in shared work and quiet decency. By autumn, the harvest is the best in years. Whitley credits the extra hands, but he knows it's more than that. The men care, truly care, about the land. Perhaps because it's the first soil they've touched that isn't stained by war. Then, one cold November morning, a letter arrives for Richter. The first in nearly 2 years. It has traveled through Red Cross channels, across borders and ruins. His hands shake as he opens it. It's from his wife. She and their daughters are alive, thin, hungry, but safe in a small village near the Austrian border. Richter sits on the barn step and weeps. When Whitley finds him there, he doesn't ask. He simply places a hand on the man's shoulder and walks away. That Christmas, the prisoners are allowed to attend a church service in the village. Some locals object, but the vicar insists. The war has ended, he says. Now begins the harder task: peace. Richter sits quietly in the back, cap in hand. Margaret sits 3 rows ahead. After the service, she approaches him shyly and hands him a knitted scarf. "For the fields," she says. "It's cold." He smiles, a rare, genuine smile, and says, "Danke, you, kind heart." Repatriation orders come in early 1946. The prisoners will return to Germany in groups. When Richter receives his, Whitley invites him into the house for tea by the fire. They speak about their sons, about loss, about how the war took everything but left them both alive. "I hated your kind once," Whitley admits quietly. Richter nods. "I hated yours too." Then Whitley says, "And yet, here we are." They sit in silence, 2 men bound not by war, but by what came after. The next morning, trucks arrive to take the prisoners away. Villagers gather to watch. Some wave. Some simply stand, unsure how to feel. Mrs. Patterson presses a parcel of food into Richter's hands. Margaret stands beside her father, the scarf she knitted now around her own neck. Richter meets her eyes, nods once. She nods back. Then the trucks pull away, rattling down the lane toward the railway station. When Richter returns to Germany, he finds his home destroyed. His village lies in ruins, but his family is alive. Together they rebuild, brick by brick, acre by acre. He never forgets Ashwell. Months later, a letter arrives at Whitley's farm, written in careful English. "Thank you," it says, "for bread, for kindness, for seeing not a soldier, but a man," Whitley writes back. Their correspondence continues for years. Brief letters across the channel, fragments of a friendship that had survived the war. In 1958, more than a decade later, a stranger appears at the Whitley farm. Older now, gray at the temples, carrying a small suitcase. It's Klaus Richter. He has saved for years to return, to say thank you properly. Whitley is in the yard when he sees the man walking up the lane. For a moment he doesn't recognize him. Then Richter smiles. Whitley's expression softens into disbelief, and then joy. The two men embrace. Richter stays for a week, helping with the harvest just as he did in 1945. Margaret, now married with children, invites him for dinner. They speak little of the war. Mostly, they talk about life, about how to rebuild, about the years they lost but somehow survived. On his last day, Richter and Whitley walk to the North Field, the first they ever plowed together. The wheat sways golden in the wind. Whitley says softly, "Same field, same soil." "But everything's changed," Richter nods. Everything. In the years that follow, similar stories unfold across Britain. Tens of thousands of German and Italian prisoners work the land, mend roads, rebuild bridges. Some go home. Others stay, marry, and raise families in the very country they once fought. These small acts of reconciliation rarely make it into history books. There are no medals, no parades, just quiet understanding, born from hardship, sustained by mercy. By the time Thomas Whitley dies in 1967, he and Richter have exchanged dozens of letters. At the funeral, Margaret reads the last one aloud. In it, Richter writes, "The war took much from me, my youth, my certainty, my country. But it gave me one thing I never expected, the knowledge that even after the worst of humanity, kindness can endure. That an English farmer could look at a broken German soldier and see not an enemy, but another man trying to find his way home. Today, the fields around Ashwell still grow wheat. The barn still stands, weathered but strong. Few remember the faces of those men, but their story remains. In letters tucked in attic boxes, in fading photographs of men standing side by side, sleeves rolled up, smiling into the sunlight. It wasn't a grand story. No battles, no glory. Just a small moment of peace in a world that had nearly destroyed itself. But sometimes, it's in those quiet, forgotten places that humanity shows its truest face. Because history is not only written in wars, sometimes it's written in the fields that grow after them.